Welcome back. Today we're looking at programs from our past that look towards the future. While some of these programs were pure fantasy, others were used to serve a very real purpose. Now I should point out that our next program from 1984 was never meant to be viewed as a prediction of the future. Made with the help of Civil Defence, it's a simulation of the 6:30 p.m. news, 30 hours after a 4.7 earthquake has struck Canterbury.
6 out of 10 people live where earthquakes strike, and there is no warning. One such place is Christchurch, New Zealand, a city of 180,000. The following news bulletin is simulated.
The earthquake which rocked North Canterbury yesterday was centred on Hanmer Springs. The extent of the disaster is not yet completely known, although civil defence authorities in Christchurch are continuing to assess the situation. Since earlier reports in the day, the death toll has risen to 41, and it's been confirmed that the numbers of injured now exceed 1,000. A state of civil defence emergency was declared in the Armuri County at 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and since then has been in force throughout the Canterbury region. However, less damage appears to have occurred on the west coast. The quake measured 7 on the Richter scale, the same as the Inangahua earthquake of 1968, and followed tremors felt in the South Island during last week. The major jolt was timed at 8 minutes past midday, and a number of aftershocks were experienced throughout the afternoon and last night. The quake brought slips and earth movement which have cut many roads in Canterbury and blocked all access into the region from the north. With many power and telegraph poles down in North Canterbury, there's even now no electricity or telephone contact. The main trunk line to Picton is closed, and several goods trains have been derailed. The track is twisted in many places, and tunnels are blocked along the coast south of Kaikoura, where much of the devastation appears to have occurred. The Railways Corporation believes that it could be several weeks before this line can be reopened, and this will have repercussions on rail ferry traffic and freight movement in the North Island. In Christchurch itself, the quake dislodged stonework in the cathedral tower, tilting the spire which it supports, and caused damage to many older masonry buildings. But damage is less than initially feared. Christchurch Hospital is fully functional. All roads in the city are now passable, and after extensive checks to the runways, Christchurch Airport is now open. Chris Harrington filed this report on activities in Cathedral Square yesterday afternoon.
Until lunchtime, it had been a typically quiet Saturday morning here in Cathedral Square. Then the quake struck, and suddenly confusion and chaos reigned. Perhaps it was fortunate that it wasn't a weekday when thousands of city workers and shoppers would have been on the streets. The authorities have advised that many roads in the city are now dangerous or impassable, but that doesn't seem to have stopped the people. There's plenty of them here now, sightseers, rubberneckers. The tilted cathedral spire has become a candle which has drawn them like moths. Fortunately, the damage appears more spectacular than serious, but sightseers are hampering the work of service and rescue teams. It's taken a while for the council to turn up. Remarkably, there haven't been any fires, and many of the alarms were set off by the quake itself. Firemen have just managed to free several people trapped in a lift in this hotel. One, I'm told, suffered a heart attack during the ordeal.
The magnitude and epicenter of the earthquake were known by the Geophysics Division of the DSIR in Wellington just over an hour after the event. However, there were conflicting stories and general confusion amongst the public in Canterbury. First indications of the intensity and extent of the devastation in North Canterbury came only late yesterday afternoon when a radio ham in Christchurch picked up a weak signal from Hanmer Springs. This picture was confirmed by the pilot of a helicopter who managed to fly a doctor and a nurse into the area last evening. Meanwhile, smoke from forest fires in the region have hampered rescue attempts, although an emergency medical unit flew into Hanmer earlier today. We hope to have film of that later in the programme, but in the meantime, Ralph Brown has been covering civil defence relief operations in Christchurch.
Bend your knees. Just bend your knees and sink down.
At times, it's hard to believe that the city is 140 kilometres from the centre of the earthquake. There have been many casualties.
Just slightly, and we'll have something under his feet.
Emergency medical staff have treated 80 patients at Linwood High School, but it's only one of 4 medical units set up in high schools around Christchurch during the afternoon. Some of the casualties have been struck by falling debris. Some were injured as they scrambled to safety. The nurses have been shocked at the condition of some of those arriving in family cars. These 2 women were in desperate need of treatment. This young man brought the women in. His own treatment had to be delayed a little longer to save their lives. The Red Cross pulled this young woman from a collapsed shop front.
It's Sarah. It's Paula.
Okay, if you just sit down back over there.
Patients were being carefully screened. Only the most seriously injured were going to hospital. The ambulances were being hampered by the condition of some of the roads and the pressure of work.
Hey, move that camera, Chris.
Since the state of emergency was declared yesterday, civil defence staff have been coordinating the relief and rescue work in this building in central Christchurch. From the outside, it's still simply the office at the base of the City Council's car park. Outwardly, there's no reassurance that anything is being done to coordinate all the activity around the city. But inside this building is a small group few have seen since the emergency began.
Just a moment, I'll put you through.
Good afternoon, Civil Defence.
As they coordinate the rescue effort, they're building up a more complete picture of the location of casualties and damage. But it's a slow process. They've rehearsed their work many times, but always with the knowledge that they could never predict the scale or intensity of the earthquake.
Message for radio, Don.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, Kashmir. This is group headquarters. Message, over.
Christchurch at this stage, it doesn't seem to be too badly off. I just want to go quickly through your service, just see where we are at the moment, and perhaps, Barbara, we can start with you. How are the nurses at this stage?
Very slow to report in.
You haven't had much contact at all?
No, I think they're probably sorting out their own homes first.
Mike, how are you placed with the electrical supply? Have you got any problems at all?
Yes, we're trying to get the supply back onto the hospital, but I think we can handle that all right. It's just a matter of getting some cables.
One of the first hurdles for the operations room was to re-establish links with the sector post at Burnside.
They're going to get a taxi out there straight away, and we'll be able to communicate with them easily. Okay, over the transport. Yeah. John, would you get a hold of the taxis, anyone, and get them to whip out to Burnside and establish a communication system between
It's easy to see parallels with a war setting. Each loss of a vital link, each site of major damage is plotted. The sign's been around for years, but it's obvious that many people didn't know to make contact with relief workers at their local civil defence post. As they arrived at Bromley Primary School, it became clear that the suburb had been lucky. Few were reporting injuries, but some were separated from their families.
No, in my own house. In your own house, then? Yeah. Flat 120 St John Street.
Have you got any children with you? Are you on your own? If you'd like to put your name on there. And then if your husband does phone in here looking for you, we'll have your name on here and we'll back you up.
No, we have phone or anything.
It all goes in the taken there.
For the Salvation Army, the role was the same, but the clients were now people who had never known homelessness or had to worry about the safety of their families.
How am I going to let
Well, did you tell them that you had a brother at Hamner when you registered?
I don't think I did.
Well, you have a chance a little later on to tell them that, and they'll be able to make contact, and they'll let you know as soon as they get any word. Because, you know, every now and again they'll get you all together, and they'll tell you just what's happening.
The stress was beginning to draw this community together. It was civil defence work at its most local level. This was a community discovering and then meeting its own needs.
Revealed that apart from the dead and the injured, the small resort town of Hanmer Springs is now facing another problem: the need to evacuate several hundred day trippers and tourists. Chris Harrington was able to fly into Hanmer today. Here's his report. I'm sorry, they're not quite ready for us. Chris will be back with that report later in the programme. New Zealand has always been an earthquake-prone country, and Fred Cockram has been looking back at earlier quakes.
Although we all know earthquakes happen in New Zealand, we tend to think that the dangerous ones happen somewhere else. When television shows us extensive damage and loss of life, it always seems to be in somebody else's backyard. New Zealanders have a long-established attitude of things like this won't happen to me. But it did happen to us in February of 1931 in Hawke's Bay, and it cost 256 lives as well as causing massive property damage. That quake had a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale, compared with yesterday's 7, and it demonstrated dramatically the effects of a significant quake on a major population centre. New Zealand's had 14 quakes of magnitude 7 or more this century, but only the 1931 shake was centred on a city. In the last 50 years, most of the big quakes have been in remote areas. Until yesterday, the Anangahua quake of May 1968 was our most recent, causing loss of life. 3 people died. The Anangahua quake showed up one of the more serious problems in New Zealand disasters: disruption to communications and access. Like many parts of New Zealand, Anangahua can be reached from only a couple of directions, and that access is easily cut. It can take time for help to arrive. Yesterday's quake was the same magnitude as Anangahua's, in the same general area, and caused the same access problems. New Zealand experiences about 2,000 earthquakes each year, and they can hit anywhere, as Brian Tallboys, then Minister of Agriculture, was to discover during an interview in 1968.
Well, this is a pretty simple question for a New Zealander to answer because, my God, we have not only got...
That shake resulted in little more than a scramble for the door. But the experts have been trying to convince us for some time now that we ought to be doing more than ducking for cover. They've been stressing the need for preparations and precautions, but without getting a significant response. It's not as though we haven't been warned over the years, in the newspapers as well as on television.
By the time this program is finished, in all likelihood, there could be a major earthquake happening somewhere in New Zealand with major loss of life and economic disruption.
We must be due for a major shake before very long. It seems to be an unnaturally calm period over the last 10 years or so.
You must remember that about 75% of the Earth's earthquakes in the world occur around the rim of the Pacific, so we're right on the firing line as far as that's concerned.
Plotting of earthquake activities shows that we're very much in the firing line. The Pacific Rim is almost constantly on the move, and in the New Zealand area that movement is particularly chaotic, as Mr. George Ibe of the Seismological Observatory explained in a 1977 television documentary.
Under the North Island, we have the Pacific Plate going underneath the Indian Plate, and down in the far southwest of the South Island, the two are the other way up, and we have the Indian Plate being forced underneath the Pacific Plate. The transition from one or the other can only be described as rather a mess.
I sometimes feel like that man who parades around the streets of London wearing a sandwich board saying, "Prepare to meet thy doom, the end of the world is nigh." And I sometimes feel that people take as much notice of me as they do of him. But somebody needs to be the conscience, because this danger of major disaster from earthquakes and other causes is very real.
I really don't think they'll have one.
Have you thought about an earthquake?
Yes. I think mainly I panic, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I'd be scared of something falling on top of me like the roof and go to an open space, which is probably the wrong thing.
I'd run for an open space. I was through the nature of earthquakes. I know all about earthquakes.
Would you know what to do if one struck?
No, I wouldn't know enough. No.
Have Have you ever thought of trying to find out what to do?
Yes, I have, but I haven't done anything about it.
Who would you go to help if you needed help in an earthquake?
Right now, say it happened. The ambulance place just over there. Just around the corner there. That's all. I don't know.
I know to go to the civil defence, but I don't know where the closest one would be.
The seismologists think that a big one is due fairly soon. Does that worry you?
No, it doesn't, because I think it's in the hands of God and they don't know. And I say a little prayer every night to be preserved from earthquakes.
Today, civil defence survey teams were inspecting damage in North Canterbury to help them assess the amount of aid that might have to be brought in from outside. Here's Ralph Brown near Waipara.
This is Highway 7. Many of the vehicles caught on this side of the earthquake rift gave up waiting and headed back to Christchurch. On the north side, traffic is queued for almost a kilometre. Most people spent last night in their cars.
And there's a special telephone service to accept offers of billets for the homeless around the Cheviot and Colborne regions.
Radio's providing most of the vital contact up here because the roads are cut or blocked in many places. This road's the main route to Hanmer Springs from the south. But until they've cleared that rift behind me, radio and helicopters will be the township's only links with the rest of New Zealand. The Civil Defence Regional Commissioner, Bill McCallum, on the right. He arrived early this afternoon for a briefing. He was told that the Huranui County Council's resources are overextended. He'll be asking for heavy machinery from outside the region.
Contrary to earlier information, it's now been established that 2 army vehicles, which were in the Lewis Pass yesterday, managed to ford the Waiau River and provide valuable support for the Air Force relief operation in Hanmer Springs. Now that report from Chris Harrington.
These forest fires have been raging since yesterday. A car collided with a logging truck and exploded on a forest road during the quake. These fires pose no threat to any town, but they have pressured helicopters working on rescue missions. And this is what's halted any effective land-based rescue attempts so far. The collapse of the ferry bridge over the Waiau River on the main road to Hanmer Springs. 2 people died in this car hurled from the bridge during the quake. Their bodies were removed only this morning by members of the Land Rover Club up here for the weekend. So, what with this bridge and mountain access roads to the north through Molesworth and Nelson Lakes cut, Hanmer is now completely isolated. Hanmer is in a fault-bound basin, and the cause of all the trouble appears to have been a movement along the Hope Fault. That fault runs from the Southern Alps right up to Kaikoura and along the Hanmer River, near where these army trucks are crossing a ford. These are the lucky ones. There are many still out there waiting for medical help. When the quake struck, there were only 2 doctors in Hanmer Springs, and they've been battling away ever since with the help of the hospital's nursing staff. Late last night, a small emergency medical unit was flown into the town, but this work has been hampered because most of the medical supplies were destroyed by the quake itself. I've been talking to some of the nursing staff and doctors here at the field hospital, and they say that most of the injuries are broken bones, although there are a few cases of internal bleeding. The Land Rover Club and local four-wheel drive owners have had a mammoth task to deliver the victims here. And with the arrival of the Army and Air Force, it's Dunkirk, the local domain. The sound of the first helicopters coming up the valley a few hours ago was an emotional event for the people here. It was the first tangible sign of help from the outside world. The helicopters brought in this field hospital and its doctors and nurses. It's been operating for a couple of hours now.
Feel my hand down here? Push my hand away. Doesn't hurt.
More than half the people here will need to be evacuated to Christchurch Hospital.
Is anything in the handbag to identify you? Think so.
Staff here have been confronted by all the extremes of the human condition, from the dead to the soon-to-be-born.
Diagnosis of pregnancy is labour.
What type? Apartments.
And oxygen.
Amount?
There are more victims here than this hospital can cope with, and more than can be evacuated immediately. This continues to be a challenge for the first 2 Iroquois helicopters up here. Each can carry 6 patients, and the flight time to Christchurch is about 35 minutes. A lot depends on the speed of these stretcher loaders. Apart from the thermal springs and hospital, the Hamner Lodge has been badly hit. At midday, there were few occupants, but ironically, it was booked out for last night. Last night, people slept where they could, in this classroom at the primary school. It's also the sector post for the frantic civil defence effort that's been going on since yesterday. What's the situation? This post is hopelessly undermanned. Few of the small group of civil defence volunteers here have had any sleep, and the strain is beginning to tell on Sector Warden Maggie Hurd.
Some people are very badly injured in Arguins Road, and I think there's 2 or 3 dead. Is Conduit Hill Road clear now? Have the Land Rover people come in? No. Back to Woodbank Road, I think. That would be better.
Just getting back to the status of the injured and dead, what's actually happening there this morning?
Several very badly injured over in Queen Mary, still waiting to go by helicopter down there.
Do you know where the Murphy family are?
Yes, they are in Harrogate Street. Could you take some food to the mailings, too?
Roughly how many homeless are there in the town, though?
We're looking for beds for over 700 people, so we're going to need a lot more beds than we've got.
Well, can you cope inside the town at the moment with that number of homeless?
No, we're hoping for helicopter transport to take some of these people out as soon as possible.
How are you coping yourself? It's looking pretty harassing around here at the moment.
Everyone's very busy. We've been working very long hours. Have you...
The clerks need to be helped, yeah. Floors collapsed.
Their floor has collapsed.
Underneath.
Can you manage with that?
Yes.
So how long can you go on coping in this sort of situation like this?
Well, we have to go on till we've got everyone clear. There are more people buried in rubble, especially in Leamington Street.
Well, do you think you can cope at the moment? Do you want more help in Hamner Springs?
Yes, we need more help to get people out of the village. We have not got any more beds after 700.
How are you coping personally, though? Are you tired?
We're all tired.
Things are far from back to normal in Hamner Springs. People here feel trapped and claustrophobic, and most want to be evacuated. And things on the weather front aren't looking very bright either. The hot, dry, oppressive weather of the last 48 hours has broken, and a cold, southerly front is on its way up the island. Already a few drops of rain are falling, and the temperature has dropped dramatically. The Hamner Springs Shopping Centre. Most of these people have been stuck here since yesterday, and they're getting bored and restless. The Quake couldn't have come at a worse time for the small resort. During the week, it's a sleepy hollow, but in the weekend, the population soars with day trippers, tourists, and families who come here. All these people have had to fare for themselves, and for many, home has become a motor vehicle.
We had all heard about your earthquakes here, but holy hell.
Where did you spend last night, then?
In the bus.
What about food?
Oh, we had some, but these civil defense people, they've been getting stuff from the supermarkets. But gee, we're okay. We didn't get injured.
The welfare of people has been the primary aim of civil defence up here, but damage to property and possessions is another question altogether. That's simply not civil defence's job. Not to mention damage to business, like the supermarket, where most of the stock will have to be dumped. This building, like others, will probably have to be demolished as it straddles one of the small earthquake rifts in the town. Everywhere the damage is obvious, like this shop front or these mangled motor cars. But the real loss can only be measured in human terms. This is less easy to assess, and to take a look around can only leave one guessing.
After yesterday's quake, which was felt throughout much of the country, the Post Office reported jammed switchboards as thousands of New Zealanders attempted to seek information. This situation has drawn a strong plea for restraint from the civil defence authorities, who advise that an information service will start operating from police stations throughout the country tomorrow. But this service is not expected to be responding effectively until later in the week. As the toll of injured and dead continues to rise, it's expected to be some time before the full effect of this latest earthquake is felt. Already, doubts have been expressed about the nation's ability to cope if, in the future, an earthquake of this magnitude were to directly hit one of the main centres. In the meantime, reaction from around the country has been that of disbelief and shock at what has happened this weekend in New Zealand.
Welcome back. Before he was chasing trains and icebergs, Marcus Lush's first foray into television was as a presenter on the late-night magazine program Newsnight. Alongside Simon Dallow and Alison Moore, Lush was charged with presenting the lighter side of the day's news, as is evident in this story from 1994 on the internet.
Welcome back. Here with Newsnight. Well, we've always told we're...
This year they picked a beauty for the annual dog sale at Tikawiti, the wettest occasion in the 8 years since the sale began. The first of these sales was held at the suggestion of a group of local farmers, and until this year was the only dog sale in the North Island. As the best-known event of its sort in the country, it's fast by way of becoming a national fixture, with buyers coming from hundreds of miles away. The main types of dogs sold here are heading dogs and hunterways. The heading dogs for closer general mustering work, and the hunterways, noisy, boisterous dogs, used for punching up big mobs of sheep and for yard work. A powerful breed of dog evolved in New Zealand for our own particular conditions. When the dogs arrive on the day of sale, each vendor and his dogs given a number. When the sale begins, the vendors are called up in turn, and each given 2 minutes to trial his dog before it's put under the auctioneer's hammer. The approximate selling time is a minute to a minute and a half. With a lot of dogs to put through, it's essential the speed of sales kept going. On this particular day, in spite of the weather, 100 dogs were sold, with nobody much inclined to hang around. A sale over, the bell rings at the start of the next trial.
A heading dog his primary job is to head sheep. That is, he runs out on a fairly wide arc to give sheep room, gets round behind them quietly and brings them back towards the owner.
Hello, what's this? Someone's going to be in trouble when he gets back.
The training part is mainly bringing out what the dog has naturally bred into. In the heading dog, it's been bred from generations to shepherd sheep. And the training part of it is mainly to correct any fault and to help bring out the natural instincts in the dog. Most young pups will start at about 3 months old, and they want just a little bit to keep them interested until they're strong enough and fast enough to head and work sheep. Provided patience is used, it's not a difficult job because the instinct to work is so strong.
In such wet and heavy conditions, it's hard to give a good trial, and bidding tends to be on the conservative side.
A 4-year-old strong, good living dog, and doing a pretty useful job out there considering the conditions of the wet sheep and the ground as we know. All right, who would have for that dog? Have you got, what, 50 for him? 50 pounds, 50 pounds. Have you got 40 for him? 40, 35. Is there 30? 30 pounds for him. 30, 25 to start him. 25. Have you got 20 pounds for him? 20 pounds to start him. I've been 20 pounds for him, I've been 20 pounds. 20 pounds, but I've been 20, get 20, get 20 pounds, but I've been 20, get 20, get 20 pounds, but I've been 20 pounds, but that's no money for a dog like him, gentlemen. A 4-year-old. Yes! 5, 25, 25, 20 of it. Yes! 25, 25, at 35, 35, 35, 35, 25 of it. At 35, and I sell him at 35, all in at 35 pounds.
Every shepherd's got his own whistle. Usually they've got whistles to guide a dog on the run out. And coming home, if a dog wants to be pulled left, they have a special whistle to bring him left, another one to bring him right, another one to come straight onto his sheep, and things like that. They vary quite a bit with different shepherds.
With the sheep heavy and tired and hard to handle, and the ground cold and soaking underfoot, it's no wonder that now and then even a good dog has its worst possible off day.
Good time off the farm, catching you anywhere, and certainly got him in great order here. 35 is running out of 35. Now where's the bed? Down here. This is the call. Gate is here. 2.5. 35 a minute. 35 a half. 35. 2.5. 32 and a half. 37 and a half. 37 and a half. 37 and a half. 37 and a half. Against the corner. I sell him at 37 and a half. All in at 37 and a half. On the market. 37 and a half. 37 and a half. Against your call bid now, Morris. 37 and a half, and I'm going to sell him at 37 and a half. He goes for that 2 and a half. A last call. All in at 37 and a half. Yes! 40. At 40, at 40, goes to Hamilton, at 40, I sell him, all in at 40 pounds.
Top price at the sale in the days before dollars was £95, as against the highest price of upwards of £200 in some years. But mostly the dogs changed hands for between £30 and £50. Most dogs were glad to see the day over at any price. A day that ended not with a bang, but a whimper.